Launch Director, NTD, our launch team is ready to proceed at this time.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, beautiful people. How are you? Welcome back to the Journeyman Chronicles. My name is Felix C. Arroyo. I am the host of your new favorite podcast. JMC is ready to roll, and I've got episode 66 on deck. I hope you've been paying attention because season 2 is starting to wind down, and we've got 3 more episodes left, including the one we're about to present today. I have a need for some R&R. And when it comes to podcasts, consistency is important, which is why I'm constantly working. And if you watch anybody that has a podcast, you'll notice that consistency is extremely important, which is why they're constantly putting out episodes and material. But with a family, I have to honor the fact that my family, especially my wife, really sacrifices a lot so that I can conduct these interviews in our home and so that I can take the time to edit and do that, this and the third. So when it comes to, taking a break, it was a no-brainer for me, really. I decided that I would implement seasons into the podcast just for that. And even physically, I'm really feeling it's been tough. Obviously, I've had a pretty busy year and I've had a lot on my mind, and I'm feeling that burnout. So I'm putting everything I have into these episodes, which isn't hard for me at all. I love what I'm doing. And so let's just get right into it, shall we? Episode 66 is a pretty big deal for me because I got to talk to Dr. Elizabeth Revell, who is the mother of Makaya Revell. I interviewed Makaya twice already. And if you're not sure who I'm talking about, go back and check the last 2 episodes. I'll post them in the link, where I interviewed Makaya Revell and his incredible journey. Obviously, there are people that played a pivotal role in that with him. And one of those people was his mom, who adopted him, Dr. Elizabeth Revell. She's such a sweetheart. They stopped by, herself and Makaya, and I got to talk with her for about an hour. She is a phenomenal woman. She's doing so much in the career of psychotherapy, which is really where her wheelhouse is. She loves what she's doing. Even in her 70s, she's still working very hard. She's dedicated to the patients that she has. Obviously, I bring that up because there's no slowing down here. She's moving along and she's busy and she's passionate, which is obviously what we're talking about on this podcast, is what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what did it take for you to get here. And we talk about that. This was not an easy road for Dr. Revell, but nonetheless, people coming along her path, people that she's met, connections that she's made, overcoming some obstacles that were put in her way at a very young age. We discuss her meeting her husband, her late husband, Dr. Alvin Revell, who I innocently in this conversation referred to by his first name only. But it was not lost on me after some time that indeed his name is Dr. Alvin Revell. We talk about, how important he was in her life. And obviously her contributions to the Mary Mambu Makaya Foundation that is started by Makaya. There's a lot here, and I'm eager to get to it. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful right now that I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Revell. My wife and my children had just gone to her house. Her and Makaya have an annual sheep shearing event. It's fundraising for the foundation, and there's a lot of activities. There's a lot of people that come together. It's a pretty cool event. It's in York, and just yesterday, like I mentioned, my wife and I, our children, we went. This is our second time going. We love it. We couldn't stay long, but I wanted to make an attempt to go see them because this is a really cool experience, and these are really cool people, and they have a beautiful home. And Dr. Revell, she's just a sweet woman, like I mentioned. So nonetheless, I'm rambling, and I know that. I tend to do that, just in case you're not hip to the podcast. But it is what it is, because it's my podcast. So anyway, let's get right to it. This is Dr. Elizabeth Revell's journey, and these are the Journeyman Chronicles. Let's go. obviously, the conversation that we're having is initiated with the journey that I shared with Makaya. But let's start from the very, very beginning, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Psychology.
Yes.
There's a lot of different legs here with that alone. What was it about that intrigued you?
Some of the things I'm going to say to you end up really illustrating the times I grew up in.
Okay, fair enough.
And when I was in high school, I wanted to be a psychiatrist.
Okay.
And my family believed that being female, I could not get into medical school. Being female and our not having connections.
Okay,
because
gotcha.
we're a blue-collar family.
Sure.
So they said, nope, forget that. So psychology was close enough, but they said, no, you have to train to be a teacher. Girls can be teachers or nurses. So when I went into undergraduate, I majored in psychology, minored in mathematics so that I would have something to teach. And I took the education credits so that if I couldn't be a psychologist, I would be a math teacher.
Okay.
So fortunately, psychology won out.
Yeah.
Now, at that time, the Vietnam War was raging, and I married when I was 21.
Okay.
And my husband and I were very busy trying to find ways for him to avoid the draft. We became VISTA volunteers. Are you familiar with that program?
No.
The acronym stands for Volunteers in Service to America.
Okay.
And it was touted as kind of a domestic Peace Corps.
Okay.
So we were sent to Chicago, and we went through a training that was so enlightening to me. I learned so much about poverty, about racism, about political corruption. And for a year, we worked there. It was the year of the 1968 Democratic Convention, so we ended up on the streets getting tear gassed along with other protesters. That wasn't the beginning of our protests. We very actively were anti-war protesters and involved in civil rights marches and so on.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that was a big part of my life at that time.
So the activism, was that something that kind of came as you experienced what you experienced through this program, or were you always savvy with how you felt in regards to war and your stance on? I mean, you said that's when you first discovered poverty and racism, so you were unaware of that part of life? I
saw racism in action in my high school. Well, there's a whole story there, but with a friend that I made that my family didn't like him being my friend, and
Gotcha.
Seeing how differently he was treated in our classes from how I was treated.
Okay.
But so it's just a little bit of awareness, but the Vista experience was extremely enlightening. I mean, they set out from the beginning to take these young kids and wake them up.
Yeah.
And they did. They were very successful at it, and I'll always be grateful for that.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Especially at that time where you probably weren't seeing, in today's world, it's common to see this side of life on full display, be it social media or TV or media in general. But at that time, I'm sure things were very much kept. They were portrayed a certain way that when you finally did see it, like you said, it was like oh my God, like what is really going on here?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The Vista program, how long did that last for you and your husband?
We were in it for a year.
Just for 1 year, okay.
Yeah. And then we came back and started working at an institution for kids that were adjudicated delinquent.
Okay.
And we were in that for a while. And then my husband was diagnosed with cancer, and he died a couple of years after the diagnosis.
Okay. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So after his death, I just fixated on graduate school.
Gotcha. To keep
Yeah.
yourself busy.
Yeah, pretty much. But then I could do what I really wanted to do, which was counseling psychology.
Okay.
So I went into a program at University of Pittsburgh that was an experimental program and all funded. The program had equal numbers of white females, white males, black females, black males. So it was an experiment in, and so all of us who were enrolled in the program were on full scholarship.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. So I did the master's degree there, and then hadn't thought about a PhD until a lot of the faculty really encouraged me. They said, no, you've got to stay. You've got to see this through.
Yeah.
So I did.
Nice.
Yeah.
The psychology part of your life and how it came about, like I'm trying to I am paying attention. What I'm thinking is when you brought up the activism and how passionate you were in your stance, couple that with the psychology. What is it about that that's intriguing you? The study of people? Is it why do people think the way they think and feel the way they like? Yeah.
I have to admit that family problems led into it.
Okay.
And for so many of my students, I'll get to in a minute how I started to teach
Sure.
master's students, but I often found that it was something going on in their family of origin that had them want to try to figure all of this out.
Okay.
In my case, there was alcoholism in my family, and a lot of conflict as a result of that. Some abuse, some was messy. So I think that had a lot to do with my motivation to get into the field. And then when I started to do psychotherapy more, individual psychotherapy more full-time, my initial focus was on people who were from families of alcoholism.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And then moved from that into more generalized trauma. Because in an alcoholic family, you're going to suffer trauma.
Sure.
And then I realized that the kind of symptoms that people had from going through trauma really generalized,
Okay.
across backgrounds, across experiences, and really how widespread trauma responses are.
Was that triggering for you personally in a field that dabbled with something so close to you?
I think the answer is yes. It wasn't during the time that I went to graduate school, but at some later point, I did a professional training program in a certain therapeutic modality. And during that program, I really worked very hard on trying to make my way through my own demons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can only imagine. I know personally for me, my own demons, and then I don't know if I could put myself in a position where I'm helping people or at least doing something that is triggering old wounds or memories. Did you ever find yourself as you were doing your studies or helping people or working with people, were there things that you started to recall about your own life that maybe you forgot for the longest time? Or did you ever find yourself going through something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I actually forgot them.
Okay.
That they were there in the memory bank somewhere.
Yeah.
But that they would arise and it would hit me how awful they were.
Okay, I got you.
You know,
how awful the memories were?
How awful the experiences
Okay,
were.
got you.
And, to me, it was just ordinary day-to-day stuff. And then I started saying, wait, this is bad.
Yeah.
This is not good stuff.
Yeah. In my own personal life, I've always I've come to that point where it's kind of like the older I get, the more I'm forced to recognize or accept, like, no, the stuff that affected me, it isn't just everyday stuff. I've lived like that. And I think, you're conditioned to kind of be like, it is what it is. And then as you get older, you're like, no, there's things we need to really put into consideration because it affected the way I would raise my children. It affected the way I would interact with my mom or my dad, or the way I would interact with my wife. I was conditioned in so many different ways that I had to really like accept the fact that, yes, I'm okay. Yes, I'm a big boy, but this had an impact on me.
It had an impact.
Yeah. You mentioned that and I'm paraphrasing, forgive me, that the trauma, the impact of trauma, how it was so widespread, it was generalized. Were you saying that you were seeing a commonality of the impact in regards to trauma with the different people that you were speaking with? Or
yeah, there are certain giveaways to people who have been traumatized, and they're documented in the diagnostic manuals that indicate symptoms of exposure to trauma. Like one of them is hypervigilance. I used to joke that children of alcoholics could never get mugged because they're always
it makes sense though.
Yeah, you always know what's going on everywhere.
Yeah, your head's always on a swivel. You're paying attention to your environment around you.
It is.
That's
so
a
that
common
kind of
thing,
hypervigilance is very common. Sometimes reliving of experiences involuntarily, like walking down the street and something hits you, oh, and then it kind of hijacks you for a little while.
Yeah.
It's an anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. So a lot of anxiety symptoms are present then.
Gotcha.
Sometimes people end up with panic attacks. Sometimes people, as you said, like you go through life and you think that's just how things are. And then at some point, the person might wake up and say, whoa, that was not good.
Yeah.
And then at that point may look for a therapist.
Where did the desire to be a therapist come into your career? What were you? Because that's another. I mean, was it psychology and psychotherapy right from the very beginning for you?
Right from the beginning.
Okay, wow, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I always wanted to do psychotherapy.
Okay, yeah.
It's interesting though. When I was a teenager, I read a book called Geordie, and that book was written by a psychiatrist. He also wrote a book called David and Lisa that ended up being made into a film. But the center of his stories were psychotic children.
Okay.
So Geordie was about a psychotic little boy and his therapist working with him. And there were things like he was afraid of rain because he had heard the term rainforest, and he thought that it could actually rain trees.
Wow.
So he would be terrified. So it was just this therapist kind of doing detective work to figure out what was it about rain that bothered this kid, and then enlightening him. Look, it's not raining trees. Or he was afraid of trash cans. So she took him out one day and they beat up a trash can,
Yeah.
And as I was reading that as a teenager, I thought that was miraculous.
Yeah.
Like to be able really to help somebody out of terrible fears like that.
Yeah, you don't ever really put into thought like the fears that people do have.
Right.
You take things for granted. Like, we can go outside when it rains. We can walk by a trash can. But there are people that genuinely have these fears.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. I never even thought about that. Just now as I'm speaking it, it's like, wow, I never thought about that.
Right.
Were you aware of how much patience? Because I'm sure it takes a lot of patience when you're engaging with somebody, when you're working with somebody, when you're like in regards to routines, methods that you use, like is it something that you put into consideration? This will take time. There's steps to help people. Like,
It's funny because I'm not aware of a need for patience. Human beings to me are endlessly interesting. So my sessions are, they go quickly. People ask me sometimes if I find the work depressing because of the problems people bring. And I just say no, because from the beginning, I can see where we're going. And so it becomes an issue of engaging the client in that, and in the hopefulness that I see from the beginning.
So you genuinely, and I'm sure you do with everybody, that you see it right from the very beginning where we're going?
Yep.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I guess it's detrimental if you're going to be in that field to have that outlook. Otherwise, I guess it would be a problem if you didn't.
For sure.
I mean, I'm sure the people in your field, do they experience burnout?
There are people who do.
Yeah.
I've not
You're
had
just
that.
not. You're.
No.
I love
No.
it.
I know.
I love it. I think one of the cool things that when I'm interviewing people and we're talking about passion and what they're doing, or it's almost like regardless of what we're talking about, it's like when you love what you're doing, when you're intrigued. You said you were intrigued. Human beings are just fascinating people. You're consistently enthralled in the work that you're doing, and the service that you're providing.
Yeah.
And so, then when you put it in context like that, it's almost like every day is another day to see what we can do. And
That's right.
Yeah.
I want to loop back a little bit because
Sure.
there's a piece of my career that I want to throw in here because I was an academic for a while. When I finished my coursework in grad school, I became a faculty member at a place called Antioch University, Philadelphia. And it was a program that was geared toward working adults who just had not completed degree programs. So because it was working adults, there I was in my mid-20s on the faculty, younger than most of my
Sure.
students.
Sure.
And fortunately, I was able to move with that, because I had the theoretical stuff and I could put that out. And then my students would really provide the knowledge,
Yeah.
based on being able to integrate the theory that I was teaching into their experience in the field. So that was pretty wonderful.
Yeah. It's almost like you were surrounded. You were surrounded by people that were older than you. So you had, were you a lot more mature for your age? Because you were always
think
surrounded
so.
by that type of environment in your past that you had brought up. I can imagine that you were maybe forced to grow up a little bit.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that's true. And then I was already widowed by then. The experiences that people my age, often don't have.
When it comes to, you mentioned a couple things. You said the alcoholism in your family was motivation.
Yeah.
Were you always consistently like, okay, I'm using this as motivation. This is it. I'm doing this. Head down. We're moving. Or were you ever like? Were you ever depressed? I mean, the reason why I bring
Absolutely.
this up is because it's a very stoic. To handle it the way that you had it's there's a lot of stoicism. I don't know if that's even a word. It's like I can't imagine it being easy to navigate like that, even though you were using so much for motivation, you were accomplishing so much at a young age, but you then also were dealing with a lot of trauma, hardships. You were widowed. You mentioned the experiences of the activism. I'm sure that was getting to you here.
Oh, I struggled with depression, during those early days. And even you mentioned burnout, and I suppose there was a point at which I got burned out because
Okay.
I mentioned that I had as many credits in math as I did in psychology.
Yeah.
And so that was a potential career direction for me.
Okay.
And the university center where I was teaching was going to close, was running out of money. I got a second master's degree in information studies, and I took a whole different tack. I went working in computing support at University of Pennsylvania, and then I started teaching at Drexel University. I was teaching systems analysis and the other things I had learned in my degree program. And it wasn't too long before I was just realizing I'm on the wrong train. I need to go back. But before I do, I have some demons I need to unearth. And so I went into an intensive period of psychotherapy myself, and then into a 3-year training program in Gestalt therapy, which is my theoretical orientation. And from there, I did a lot in the Gestalt field, all the while building my practice, but I became co-editor of an international journal of Gestalt therapy.
What is that therapy? Forgive me.
Gestalt therapy is it's based on several theoretical underpinnings. One is field theory, and in field theory, it's the idea that anything happens must be understood in relation to its context. So that sort of flies in the face of anything we do diagnostically, because we look at a person, we say, well, they're doing this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. No. We have no idea what the meaning of what they did was unless we understood the context in which they did it. So field theory is very important to my way of thinking. Some of the behaviors that look the most pathological, when you take a close look, you realize that it's saving this person's life, what they're doing. Another really important underpinning is the work of Martin Buber and the I-thou. In Gestalt therapy, we believe that it is our relationship with our client that heals.
Oh.
That's our tool.
That heals the client?
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a very intimate way of looking at it, as opposed to just very much like there's a lot of gray in there, where in a good way. It's not such a black and white fix. It's you're taking the approach is, like you said, the relationship. So you're really focusing on bonding and listening. Obviously, listening is a part of it, but in this case, it's a big tool.
Oh, big time.
Big time, yeah.
They need to really experience that they're supported by me, because otherwise, why will they go on the journey with me?
Right. And it's not like you're just making them believe it. It's a genuine, you are all in.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What's that feel like when you have an experience of a patient that believes it and sees it, and there's a connection, and you're seeing what you've wanted to see.
Yeah.
Like, how's that feel?
Oh my goodness. Like the top of the world. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's helping, it's serving, it's being of service. I can only imagine. I always tip my hat. My wife was always interested when she was younger to dabble in a field like this.
Was she?
Yeah, and I've always tipped my hat, because I brought up patience early, because you really do. But I guess it's like you said, if it's not hard, then it's life, it's breathing for you.
Exactly.
But for me, it's just like I trying to listen to my kids, my little girls, and trying to get them to listen to me. I can only imagine the patience it would take. But when you are passionately involved, when you're all in, when it's something that you live and breathe, this comes easy, or not easy, but it's easier than probably most people that would just try to get in for other reasons.
Right.
At what point now, because I'm going through what Makaya and I had discussed, and I'm also looking over the information of you that I had. And at what point does your husband Alvin come into the picture?
I met him at Antioch when I was on the faculty.
Okay.
And he was a high-level administrator there, so I did what you're not supposed to ever do, and that's fall in love on the job.
You got one life, though.
Yes, for real. And I did indeed.
Yeah.
I just did indeed. Yeah, so it was kind of one of those experiences where when you start to connect, you're like, oh, it's you. There you are.
Yeah.
There you are.
Yeah.
I wondered when we were going to find each other.
There you go.
Yeah.
Through the pictures that I saw, and it's a small window that I have, but it was easy for me to see the relationship with all three of you. But then as I saw some of your posts, and my condolences, I know he passed a few years back. But I could even in the wording that you were using, it was a relationship unlike any other. Yes or no? Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the way the setup was at the home that we have now is Alvin and I had offices across a waiting room from one another. So my clients, and he wasn't working much at that point.
Okay.
But my clients would see him. He would make sure to meet them and get to know them. And there were people that ended up, and told me this specifically, believing in the possibility of finding somebody that you could really connect with by seeing the two of us.
Wow.
Because there'll never be anything like that again. He was remarkable.
Yeah, I do know what that feels like. I do know, and that's another thing that comes easily. Marriage is work. You choose every day to put that work in, but when it's with that one person, it's like this is a no-brainer for me.
Right.
I appreciate you being candid about that, because a lot of people, and I'm not sure if you experience this in your field, but it's the emotional implications that love can do to somebody, the heartbreak or the loss of someone that you love, dealing with your patients that may have had that experience and it impacting them one way or another. Were these and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you're so heavily involved in this field and so passionate about it.
Yes.
On this scientific level, but then you're also really incorporating a lot of emotional. Is there a spiritual connection with your work, or is it just all?
I don't usually think of it in that way, but I guess this might come under that heading because there's love in it.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the teachers that I had was speaking at a very big conference, and somebody from the audience asked him the question, "Do you love your clients?" And he stopped and thought for a while. You could see he really wanted to give an accurate answer. And what he said was, I think that if you really know somebody and you're not threatened by them, you love them.
Yeah. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Love to me is such a powerful emotion, but it's also like the frequency that I believe that people feel just with love is strong. So I appreciate that. I never looked at it that way. But yeah, you're right. If you don't feel threatened by somebody, then that is love, and
That is love.
it's a different form. You're so conditioned to look at love certain ways.
Right. Right.
I appreciate that. This is a great conversation. So you and Alvin, how long were you married with Alvin?
We were together a lot longer than we were married. So we started to be interested in one another in 1981. And then in 1991, we moved in together to our home in York. And then in 2000, we got married.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So 20-some years at that point. But, I mean, that's, what, like you said, when it's with the one that you are, it's him.
It's him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At this point, when you're married, around that time is when Makaya is starting to come into the picture. Was it 2003, around there?
Yeah, 2004 maybe.
2004.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
How was that experience, considering everything we just talked about and how you are invested?
Right.
Was it something when you saw Makaya and the story that came with him, were you immediately enthralled with helping? Was there something you saw in him?
I want to take the story back a little bit.
Please.
From that. I don't claim to be very spiritual, and yet there are things that happen that I just can't believe are coincidental.
Okay,
so,
fair enough.
And this was one of them. I got a phone call asking me if I would take a pro bono case. Now, I was in my late 50s, and I had my head down. I was thinking, I've got to sock away money for retirement.
Sure.
And so I wasn't taking pro bono cases anymore.
Gotcha.
So I get this phone call, and the guy asks me, and I said, yes. And then I was going, who said that?
Oh, you just instinctively answered.
I just said yes. Yeah. So I started seeing this young man, and somebody told us that he had a friend there. They were living in a place called Friendship House, which was a residence that unaccompanied minors or family groups could stay, and it was a private foundation that funded it.
Gotcha.
And it enabled these folks to not be in jail. So one night there was an event, and we had agreed to take the young man that I was seeing in treatment and his friend. And his friend was Makaya. And he was, you'll find this hard to believe, but he was so quiet. But
not Makaya.
He didn't have much English, and I didn't realize that's what that was about.
Gotcha. Makes sense now. Yeah.
And we just liked him. I mean, he was funny, he was cute, he was sweet, he was all of that. And then I think it was maybe 2 weeks after that, 2 or 3 weeks. And he had called us a couple of times in the meantime, stayed in contact. But I got a call from somebody at Friendship House to come and see Makaya right away, because he had gotten word that his mother had died in Congo and he was in bad shape. So I went, and Alvin and I just progressed from there. I started to see him as a client, but for a very short time, because we started to, have him come to dinner with us every night. And we'd pick him up after school, and he would spend the evenings with us, and then we'd take him back to Friendship House.
Gotcha.
Then Friendship House started to look like a not safe environment for him. He had a roommate that was schizophrenic, and things were getting weird. So we said, just come to live with us. And then another woman who worked at Friendship House said to us, why don't you adopt him? And we went, adopt him? Oh, yeah. Sure, why not? And I remember riding with Alvin in the car and him saying, this was meant to be, don't you? Mm. This is no accident.
Yeah. That takes me back to the phone call where you just instinctively answered.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you said you're not a spiritual person, but there's some things that you believe aren't coincident, or that aren't
right.
coincidence. And so it's almost like, was there something in the works? Was this meant
Yeah.
to be? And then it gets to the point where you're just like, I acknowledge that I can't explain it.
Right.
I just know that we're here now because of that. And
Yes.
it's a beautiful feeling where things start to kind of fall into place on their own. And
That's right.
You just ride the wave.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the reason I keep avoiding the word spiritual is I don't seek to explain any of that.
Gotcha.
But I know it exists. I know it happens. I don't know what the driving force is, but,
Yeah.
it's whatever it is has certainly worked in my life.
Yeah. The understanding of adopting Makaya and that process, there wasn't a second thought in regards to like similar to the phone call where it was just like, yes, we're doing it. It's almost like we're doing it. We'll make it work. We'll think about that later.
Exactly.
This is what we need to do.
Exactly.
I can't explain it. I just, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's not, and the reason why I bring that up is because it's not, and my conversation with Makaya, we kind of echoed this sentiment a little bit where this wasn't in something that, we'll just flip a coin and we'll adopt them. It was like, no, there's a huge undertaking here. It was a responsibility that obviously you upheld, you and your husband. But with that being said, you didn't think it over. You didn't sleep on it. Yeah. Yeah. Were you aware, besides Makaya telling you what he was experiencing at the Friendship House, could you see that from your standpoint of what was going on? Was that something you knew of already, or everything that you heard about was just coming from Makaya?
I didn't know much about him
Okay.
except what came from him, except over time I came to learn more and more. And he seems to have people enter his life when he needs them.
Okay.
I've seen this over and over with him.
Yeah.
And of course, Alvin and I were an example of this. One story I like to tell because I think it was so remarkable is Makaya and I took a road trip cross country and back. And we were at the Badlands in South Dakota.
Okay.
And we got to a place where there was a vista point, a place to take photographs. And I pulled over and I said, come on, let's take some pictures. And he said, I don't feel like taking. And I said, we've driven all the way from Pennsylvania. You're getting out of this car.
We're getting this Polaroid.
That's right. That's right. And then he said, what I really wish I could do is to talk to one of the people on this reservation. The Lakota Sioux reservation was close by. So, well, whatever. We're going to take some pictures. So we went out in the Vista Point and we walked down a little ways, and I looked back and I saw a man standing kind of at the top of the rise, and he was looking. And then he spotted us, and he made a beeline.
Wow.
He came straight to us. He was someone who taught at this community college on the Lakota Sioux reservation. And his Native American name translated to Teacher of the Red Way. And he and Makaya engaged one another like brothers.
Wow.
And they talked about tribes. They talked about having fathers that taught them by bad example. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I'm going to be, but I know what I'm not going to be.
Gotcha.
They had that commonality. He asked Makaya what his name meant, and I'm going to blank on it, but it's the thing that you have, but it isn't yours.
Okay.
And the guy was visibly moved by that, and he hugged Makaya. And the whole time the guy never even turned to look at me until Makaya said, "This is my mom." Wow. And then he turned around and he embraced me. And then at some point he got a call and he said, "Oh, I've got to go."
And he was gone.
And he was gone. Now, we're Facebook friends with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he's still connected. But Makaya wanted to talk to somebody from the reservation, and there he was.
Yeah, and he was actively looking for what seems to be you and Makaya.
It seemed like that. So I don't know what drove him.
Yeah.
Because we never talked about that, but it was just so clear.
That's interesting. I do like that discussing things like people come into your life for a reason. People come into your life for a season, for many seasons. And I try, I've had my own experiences, and I've been trying to stay really hip to that as I get older. The good and the bad, there's a reason why I had this conversation with somebody at this party who I'll never see again. But we really had this wonderful conversation, and my perspective on life is altered in a better way. I'm forever grateful, and I'll never see this individual again.
Wow.
It's that type of experience that I've had where every time I meet somebody, I really try to just pay attention and appreciate the moment.
Yes.
Because I feel like that's the gift of whatever's going on. I don't know what's going on. I just know there's a reason for it, and I'm just going to appreciate it. Hence, like the whole premise of the podcast, which is like meeting new people to get different perspectives on life, but also just to like meet new people, like, and I've been very fortunate enough to have that experience. So one of the things that I got into speaking with Makaya, and I briefly saw this on your page as well. I would love your take on it, but it's the life with mom bit that him and I. I mean, the reason why I bring it up is because I see this bonding relation, this relationship with the both of you.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's very loving, and there's also a lot of playfulness in there. Is that something that you? And I'm just kind of pulling at straws here, but in regards to what you experienced growing up and what you're experiencing now as far as a family dynamic, is there things now that you're engaging in more because you didn't have that when you were younger, or no?
It may be. I really never thought I was going to have children.
Okay.
And I was 58 when I had my first.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So, and there are things that were not good in my growing up that I've repeated with him.
Gotcha.
I mean, I'm in many ways a terrible mother.
Okay.
You know, I yell.
We all yell. I was just yelling an hour ago.
Were you? Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Manipulate sometimes. Use guilt when I can.
Gotcha.
But there's a playfulness that Makaya and I have achieved with one another that's so much fun. And sometimes we'll be having an exchange, and then he'll get this look in his eye, and I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to read about this on Facebook. So
I think that's pretty cool that you're already aware of the possibility of it being on Facebook, and you're like, okay, well, this is there ever a time where you're like, no, this is not going on Facebook?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
You got to draw the line sometimes.
Yes,
with some.
you do.
The work that he's done, and him and I have discussed that you've been a part of that journey with him as well. Was that something that you were doing from the very beginning, or yeah?
Yeah, and I've always wanted to provide him with the supports that he needed to do what he was going to do. So at one point he said to me, I want to have an orphanage in Congo. And I said, okay. And inside I'm thinking, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I said, well, if you want to do that, the first thing we have to do is we have to form a nonprofit, a 501c3. So we asked an attorney friend of ours who would be a good person that was familiar with that process. And he told us, and she worked with us, and we created this 501c3, the Mary Mambu Makaya Foundation, named after his mother. And so that was nice. I mean, I really thought that was the end of it.
Okay.
Because I could not imagine all the steps involved in creating an orphanage.
Yeah.
And Makaya at that time had other fish to fry. He was still in school. Then he got in graduate school. He was busy with all of that. And then as soon as he finished graduate school, he started connecting with friends and with people in Congo. And he really wanted to target children who were orphaned by the war. And next thing I knew, we had 2 sets of twins that had both been recovered from villages that were destroyed, and all the people either killed or drawn away, but these babies were left behind. Next thing I knew, we had 4 babies.
Wow.
And I still shake my head sometimes.
Yeah.
He does things that I would never even try to do. I would just think would be far beyond my reach.
Yeah.
So I always feel like I'm there to sort of back his play, but he has dreams that I can't even wrap my mind around.
I think that kind of goes back to the you said that you didn't think you were ever going to have children, but that is a motherly instinct of you to be supportive, even though you aren't seeing the vision that he's seeing.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I
Where
do.
it's almost like I'm going to support you in this. I don't know where this is going, but
Right.
obviously he did. And so it's
Right.
almost like you continue to be as supportive as possible, but then you're like amazed, and it's easy to then push even more because he's obviously proving that to you that it can be done. When it comes to the work that's being done for the foundation, and you mentioned that the lawyer friend that you got involved, one of the things that kind of just went off in my mind was you made a comment in the very beginning of the conversation about the blue collar family that you grew up in, that it was you could only be a psychotherapist or this, that, and the third if you had connections. And so now here, do you ever ponder on like where you are in this life where now you have established yourself that you do have those connections? It's almost like I got there my way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I had to bring that up because as soon as you said that, I was like, wow, that's the first thing I just thought of was that's like a complete like 360 in a way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've met some people that were absolutely shining lights in my field of Gestalt therapy.
Yeah.
I've been mentored by people who are who have written a lot, who were the kind of the shining lights of the field. I mean, I got to meet them.
Yeah.
I got to sit with them. I got to talk with them. It's amazing.
Yeah. You ever reflect on this journey of yours and where you are now? Like you mentioned, you didn't think that the foundation was going to go where, like, you thought it was done, and they continued. Do you ever ponder on this entire journey of yours and the different avenues and roads that you've taken to get to where you are now? It's a pretty remarkable story, and I'm only getting a small little window of it.
One of the tenets of Gestalt therapy that I forgot to mention was the importance of the here and now.
Okay.
And so with clients, their histories will come into the story if the effect of that history is present now.
Okay.
We don't just go dredging.
Okay.
But somebody will say something and it's something that belongs to another time, and you can recognize it, and that's a thing that has to be worked through. So I said all of that to say, I don't know that I reflect that much in that way because I'm living now.
Yeah.
And the challenges of now are plenty.
What are the challenges now, do you mind?
Well, my energy isn't what it used to be, and some things that, for example, are going on in the foundation, I'm pulling back.
Okay.
And just disengaging a little bit. And I know Makaya doesn't always like that because there'll be something he'll want me to do, and I'll just say, no, I'm not doing that. And then continuing to see my clients. My practice is really active.
Okay.
I'm 76 and I'm working full time.
Yeah.
So that's enough. That's plenty.
Did you practice in your home?
Yes.
Okay. At least you got that where you are comfortable at home. Your practice is there. Your clients are coming to you.
That's right.
But that is an emotional. Does that drain you emotionally, the work that you're doing, even though you can separate it? I'm sure. Does it take a toll on you in that regard or no?
No.
No.
No, I really feel much more energized by it than depleted.
Wow.
Now, I will tell you that at the end of my work day, which is usually 9 at night, I'm done.
Yeah.
So Makaya knows that he knows not to come to me with anything. He wants, I barely want him to talk to me. It's like, get away from me.
Any pending emails could be sent tomorrow morning.
That's right. That's right.
I love it.
Right.
I love it.
So in that sense, I'm tired, but I'm not drained. It's different.
Got you. I think it's so cool, though, that you're not drained by it, because that just continues to show this is your purpose.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense, or that goes back to like when you find something that you love doing and that you engage with it wholeheartedly, it's like breathing. This doesn't like the podcast, as tired as I get, the next day I wake up and I'm ready to go at it all over again.
Oh, wow.
So I can understand that like drive. I appreciate that. I appreciate this conversation. You taking the time out of your schedule to come here. To wrap up, what I like to discuss is like what's the goal here? What's your for the next 5 years or so? What do you see yourself doing? You already kind of hinted where you're starting to kind of pull yourself back a little bit from some of the things. Is that are you kind of gonna fall into the mentor role a little bit and sit in the back and
yeah. That's something that I meant to set up and I never really followed through with. I had some people that were interested in a supervision group with me, and I just never really followed through with that. So not so much that, except that I have several clients who are therapists.
Got you.
And so in that case, that happens. But more, I'm just in the everyday with my clients who manage to find me. Yeah.
You're just going to fall back a little bit with that too, as well? Is that what you're saying?
Interestingly, not in the foreseeable future.
Okay.
In that the pandemic has been so destructive to people's mental health.
I can imagine.
I'm seeing more clients now than I ever did in a week. And the need is there. There are weeks when I turn down 2 or 3 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't see stepping back quite yet, because the need is just so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't do much else other than see my clients.
Well, you've got some beautiful alpacas and a beautiful home that my family and I got to see, and hopefully we'll get to see it again very shortly here.
Yeah, I hope so.
So I can imagine, nice, especially at this time of year. I'm sure you sit outside, nice and relax, and enjoy the time, enjoy your life. Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely. Dr. Elizabeth Revell, thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate this conversation.
It's a privilege, Felix.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is it. We're done.
All right.
Dr. Revell, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit and talk. I genuinely do appreciate it. I appreciate the work that you're doing and the work that you've done. Thank you for being open and honest and transparent about some things that maybe people didn't know about you. And I look forward to seeing you again, seeing you and Makaya again. Continue doing what you're doing and continue to find the place that makes you more comfortable. If you need to find a little seat in the back to chill and relax and let the work get done, so be it. I think you've earned that. But nonetheless, take care of yourself this summer, and as always, be safe. As for the rest of you, I will see you next week with the next episode of the Journeyman Chronicles. After this, now we are down to 2 episodes left before the end of season 2. 2 left in season 2. Remember to maintain focus and stay continuous through all 4 seasons. My name is Felix C. Arroyo, and these are the Journeyman Chronicles. Y'all be safe.